Hey guys, welcome to another weekly focus, and I hope you had a great week. So I had a couple of trades this week, especially the gold position I was holding. So let's take a minute or two and go through the trade recap, and I'll show you guys the trades ahead and what I have for the coming week. Alright, so here's the gold position I had. So if you look at this, I think I mentioned this last week. I was looking for a scaling on this position. So I had an initial entry right here, and I was looking for buys, and the intention was just to take out this area, to take out this high right here. So I had my first entry at an area like this. I had a scaling once price pulled back to this area. So here was my scaling position right there. And if you look at this, it's just a simple trend line move. It's an impulse correction. So I had the buys off of this area, and the intentions again was just to have price taking out this highs. Now when you look at this, price did play out to the upside, then we had a movement to the downside. So I'll show you the management on this one real quick. So let's take this out. So if you look at this, I had to close my position. So I had the initial buy and I had the scaling. So once price took out this trend line and we started moving to the downside, so this piece right here for me was like an invalidation of the trend line moving to the upside. So there was no need holding the positions again on gold. So I had to close it. So if you look at this, so the initial position, the scaling was about 4.12. So the scaling gave me, I think, 4.12. The initial position gave me 4.29. So when you look at it, like the total from the initial buys and the scaling was 8.41%. So that was a good trade on this initial buys on gold. Now you look at the next position I took, because if you look at the structure again, it's like a little change. Price moving to the downside, price moving to the upside. We had a violation, so it was like a break test and expecting prices to move to the downside. So I had entries at an area like this. With this sell position, price took me out. So you look at this piece right here, and it's a -1 coming in from the sell position. So I had a -1 on this piece, I had a -1 on these sells, and I had 8.41% on the buys. So give or take, I think that's about 7.4% for the week, and that was a good trade on gold. I did attempt a trade on US30, so I was looking for buys off of this on US30. So it was the same thing. It was an impulse correction, and I was looking for buys off of this area. So I knew we still had this piece to play with, and I was expecting prices to move to the upside and for us to take out this highs. So that was a game plan looking at this, but the market had a different game plan as well. So this was a -1, and I didn't update this. So it was a trade closed at -1. So that was a -1% on this piece right here. So it's a -1 on US30, and I think the best position to have was on gold. So that's it for the trade recap, and let's go back and look at the pairs. Let's look at the DXY and other pairs and see what we have. Alright guys, so here's the DXY on the weekly time frame. So if you zoom out just to look at the bigger picture, it's an impulse correction, impulse, you get a correction, it's an impulse, and you get a correction. So you can look at this, let's say you can look at this as a consolidation, and you can look at it as just a pullback to the downside. So it just depends on you, on the structures you're playing with. But personally, staying on the weekly time frame, there's a few things I like to pay attention to. So the first one is just the psychological level. We're currently trading below this psychological level of 100, and my anticipation again was to take prices all the way to 110. If we break out of this structure and get a test of this area, then we could see prices moving again to the upside. So that's what I'm looking at, let's say on the higher time frame, like the weekly time frame, and just a bigger picture thing. It's still price moving to the upside. It's an impulse correction, but if you pay attention to this piece right here, so this is what is happening currently. I think for like a couple of weeks now, price has been, so let's see how many days has this been. So price has been doing this for like 133 days already, and we'll be moving to the downside, giving you this lower lows and lower highs. So if you look at it, it's a low, it's a pullback, it's a low, it's a pullback, then there's a low, and there's a pullback. So looking at this on the weekly time frame, here's my anticipation. If price comes back above 100, which is a psychological level, if price trades above this area and it holds above this point, then we could see price pulling back, testing, and this inability, or let's say it comes down a little bit further, but then I'm expecting prices to move again to the upside. And the bigger picture thing is for us to take out this highs and this psychological level of 110. So that's a big picture move for me on the DXY, but this is on the weekly time frame. And again, this is going to take time on the weekly time frame because you're looking at this space, and just for price to drop to the downside, it's taken us 133 days already. So let's move to the daily time frame and let's see. Now this is becoming really interesting because when you look at this on the daily time frame, I was looking at this movement. It's like, let's say it's an impulse, it's a correction, it's an impulse, it's a correction, it's an impulse, and it's a correction. So price has been pulling back to these areas and respecting this piece right here. And the thing that catches my attention on this pair, like currently, is how price reacts every time we come back to this trend line right here. So if you look at the interaction around this point, price reacts at this point and you get an impulsive move to the downside. Same thing, there was an interaction here and you had an impulsive move to the downside. So this piece right here, we didn't really get to the trend line, that's fine. So I'm looking at this area right now. So I was expecting prices to push to the downside impulsively so we can take out this lows. And if you look at this, price did play to the downside just to an area like this, then we had another push again to the upside. So looking at this, is like there's difficulties for price to move to the downside. And when I look at prices like this, it's always an early sign or an early indication we might be breaking out of this trend line very soon. So this is the trend line I'm looking at on the daily time frame, because my anticipation once price reacts from certain areas is for this impulsive move to go to the downside so we can take out this lows and lows like this. So when I was looking at this, I was expecting prices to react from this area and take out the lows, and this hasn't happened. So again, we're still having another reaction thing from here. So let's zoom in on this piece right here. So the first thing is we traded above this psychological level. We had a delivery to this trend line right here. We had sellers stepping in, and at the time once we had price moving to the upside, we was trading above the psychological level of 100. So we're trading above 100. So if price had stayed above this 100 level, I was expecting prices to move to the upside progressively, but we had this rejection from the sellers and we had prices pulling back below this psychological level of 100. So we had price coming back again, just like a break and testing, and we had price testing this area one more time. And currently we've seen the sellers reacting, so price is moving to the downside. So looking at this on the daily time frame, and let's say the 8-hour time frame and the 4-hour time frame, my question is, coming into next week, is the DXY going to take out these lows right here? Because if we take out these lows right here, then we could see prices coming back to this trend line, which is something I've been looking at on the weekly time frame. So there's certain levels I'm looking at and there's certain points I'm paying attention to. So I realized prices still moving to the downside because of this, not because of this trend line, but as prices moving to the downside, and I'm looking at this trend line on the daily time frame, prices reacting from that area and taking prices to the downside. So if this movement has to continue to the downside, then I'm expecting these lows to get taken out, and let's say a delivery to the weekly time frame. So that's a piece I'm looking at. So I'm just paying attention to this fraction right here on the daily, on the weekly time frame. I want to see how the sellers are going to interact and probably take prices to the downside. So that's what I'm looking on the daily time frame. But at the back of my mind, yeah, if price breaks out of this trend line, because we've been holding this piece for like 133 days, if we see price breaking out of this area, moving to the upside, then we could now anticipate that If price starts pulling back to the downside, we're looking at a psychological level again, 100, and we're expecting prices to then move to the upside. So that's something I'm paying attention to on the DXY. So I think with this we can look at lower time frames, and let's say I'll clean this and let's look at the 8-hour time frame and see what's happening. So here's what's really interesting with this pair. So if you look at it from the weekly time frame, you have this area where I'm expecting buyers to react from. On lower time frames, on the daily, on the 8-hour time frame, we have this. So it's like a squeeze that's happening right now. You have this pressure from the sellers, you have sellers coming in. On the higher time frame again, we're expecting buyers to step in from this area. So let's see how price pulls back to this area, and if price can come back to the downside, taking out this lows, then I'm expecting prices to deliver on the weekly time frame, the trend line on the weekly time frame, and for us to see price moving again to the upside. So there's a little piece you can look at on here's on the 8-hour time frame. So if you have to go with the market flow thing, the market flow currently is price moving to the downside, making lower lows and lower highs. But again, we have this piece right here. So we have this piece right here. So if price pulls back, I'm still expecting a movement to the downside. So take out this lows, take out this lows on the weekly time frame, or on the daily time frame. So that's something I'm paying attention to right here. So if we do not take out these lows, so if there's an inability for prices to take out these lows, because if you look at it, for the very first time, we had an interaction at this point. We had sellers coming in and we couldn't take out this low. So if you look at it progressively, the price is still moving to the up. Like we're taking prices to the downside, but the lows are not getting lower, so it's just getting higher. So this might be an early indication for price to break out, test, and you see a movement to the upside. So that's what I'm looking on the DXY. I'll pay attention to it, because once we break on the higher time frame again, on the weekly time frame, we're expecting prices to move to the upside. So that's my look, that's my take on the DXY. So let's look at other pairs and I'll pay attention to this. Hopefully we can break out of this, and if we don't break out of this, let's see how price moves aggressively again to the downside. So I'm looking at this area. If we can take out this lows, if we can take out this lows, it's gonna give us like really good opportunities. So that's my take on the DXY right there. And let's look at the first pair. Alright guys, so let's start with gold this time. So I think I've been having really good trades on gold, and for some reason the structures on gold has just been a little bit better and easy to read compared to the indices, which is like my bread and butter. But let's look at gold and see. So here's on the weekly time frame, and here's my overall take on this. If you look at what price is doing, and you can use this channel just to help you anticipate where price is going to react from and stuff like this. So I have this channel move right here, the lower part and the upper part right here. So price is moving to the upside, and while I'm looking at this, we're currently trading above 3,000, this psychological level right here. So the bigger picture again, if price finds it difficult to go through 3,000 and trade to the downside, then my next point of interest, or the next area I'm anticipating price can move to, has to be 4,000. So once I had this look and this take on the weekly time frame, or on this higher time frame, so here's what I was looking at. Now the first thing is we had price violate in this channel, because normally you should expect prices to come back to an area like this, an interaction here, an inability, and you see price coming to the downside. So that was not the case, and price just went through this upper trend line. So if I zoom into this area and let's look at this, so we're paying attention to this piece right here. So you have this trend line right here. So we had a break and price coming back, testing this area. That was a good rejection at this point. So the anticipation again is for prices to move all the way to 4,000. Now I was looking at this morning and just asking myself what price has been doing during the previous weeks, and if you pay attention to this area, it's pretty easy to say price has been consolidating within an area like this. And if you're just looking at this from the weekly time frame, it's easy to say price has been consolidating within an area like this. But within every consolidation, or within every range on the higher time frame, if you step down to lower time frames, so let's do something like this. If you have a range like this on a higher time frame, let's say this range is on the monthly time frame or the weekly time frame, for example. On lower time frames, every move is a trend you can play with and you can capitalize on. So everything is a trend you can play with and capitalize on. So that was something I was looking at today, and I was like, yeah, there's a good trend you can see on the 4-hour time frame, the daily, the hourly, but on the weekly time frame it looks like price has been consolidating. So the take again, we had price trading above this trend line. We had a test of this area, and I'm just building the story. I'm just looking for reasons. I'm trying to understand the price movement. I'm trying to understand where price is most likely going to gravitate to. I know we haven't come back to test, let's say 3,000. We haven't tested this area, and we had a minor test around an area like this, which was good, but we've not had that deeper test to an area like this to see prices moving to the upside. So that's something I'm paying attention to as well. But just looking at it from this time frame, and I'm connecting the dots, we had a break of this trend line. First thing, price coming back, inability, that was a test of this area, and we see prices moving to the upside. So looking at this, and let's say we move down to lower time frames just to make sense of what's happening. So on lower time frames on gold, I have the same trend lines I was looking at last week. And again, you need to understand the market flow. What is price telling you from these higher time frames? And this is what I'm looking at. So this is what price is telling me, and it might be telling you something completely different. That's fine as well. So you have an impulse correction, impulse correction, impulse correction, impulse correction, impulse correction. When you look at this piece right here, you look at this piece, right? Sorry. Let's do this. You look at this piece right here, everything is just an impulse to the upside right here. So within this impulse, you have corrections coming in. So let's clean this. So I have two trend lines on the daily time frame, and here's my anticipation. If price fails to move to the upside, so let's say we get a violation of this trend line. If we get a violation of this trend line, I'm looking for a delivery back to this area. We have this piece right here. There's a psychological level of 3,000, and there's a trend line as well coming from the weekly time frame. So that's something I'm paying attention to, that trend line from the weekly and from, I think, from the monthly time frame. So that's something I'm paying attention to. I know if there's an inability for price to move to the upside, then we'll get that pullback to 3,000, that psychological level on the trend line. Now, you look at this still on the daily time frame. We have this sort of piece I'm playing with right now. So currently, this is what we're playing with. It's an impulse correction, impulse correction. So looking at this again, if price stays within this trend line right here, then I'm still looking for the overall movement to the upside. I'm still looking for the overall buys. So we did an initial buy, I think, at an area like this, which is what I closed. Like the positions are closed already around this area. That's what we had from last week. So let's see how we can make sense of this, and let's look at, let's say, the 8-hour time frame. Because when you look at this now on lower time frames, it starts making lots of sense. So the same thing, it's an impulse and it's a correction. So sometimes you get a correction like this. Sometimes you get a correction that gives you something like this, and for price to move again to the upside. So it's always important for you to study the corrections and see what price is giving you. So right here, I have an impulsive move to the upside, and I have a correction to the downside. Now, this as well is really, it starts making lots of sense when you move to lower time frames. So we have this piece right here from the daily time frame, and we have this piece on the 8-hour time frame. So it's like a squeeze thing, and I'm just trying to make sense and see what price is really trying to do. So personally, I would love to see gold, let's say, taking out these lows. If we can take out these lows, so we'll see price pulling back to this area. This is going to make lots of sense to me because we'll be playing at this point. So let's clean this. If price pulls back to this area right here, if we get price pulling back to an area like this, it makes more sense because we're looking at this as the movement from the daily time frame. So if we can see price coming back to this area, then we could see that's like the impulsive move again to the upside, taking out these highs right here. So that's something I would like to see. Again, price is going to do something completely different, or price might respect this and play out as we're anticipating. But looking at it from this time frame, we have sellers coming in like right here, and we've had sellers all the way. So we've had this progressive move to the downside every time you have an impulsive move to the upside. So we're currently facing a squeeze at this point, and we could see price trading within this area, push like this up until the point where a decision is made. Then you get price moving to the upside, or you get price moving to the downside. So let's zoom in, and there's a couple of things I'm looking at on this pair. If we break out, because normally I'm expecting prices to come back to this area so we can take the buys off of this area to the upside. Now let's look at it from the other side. So there's always two sides to the coin. If price starts moving to the upside and we don't get the pullback, so let's say we take out this piece right here, what is the game plan? So if we take out this piece, I'll look at this structure and this price moving to the upside, and the same thing, giving us an impulse correction. There was a break, impulse correction to the upside, or you get a break right here, you get price pulling back, and you see a structure like this. So if we break out of this piece, I'm just letting you see this. If we break out of this piece to this side, to the upside, then I'm paying attention to this fraction right here. It's price moving again to the upside. So let's see if I can do a channel thing. If we break out, then I'm paying attention to this. So I hope you can see it right here. Yeah. So if we break out, this is what we're looking at, a movement like this to the upside. Then we start looking for the pullbacks, the impulse correction thing. Now if this doesn't happen, so let's say there's an inability and we see price coming to the downside, you can anticipate the movement to the downside as well. Let's look at the 4-hour time frame. So here's what I'm looking on the 4-hour time frame, and I have this piece right here, and I'm looking at this structure right now. So it's an impulse correction, and let's see how price is going to move. So in both directions, and the craziest move on gold would be for prices to come back to an area like this, an inability for prices to buy off of this area. So an inability, then you get a drop. And if I see something like this, price pulling back to areas like this, then I'm expecting a movement to the downside. Psychological level 3000, trend line right here, and that's how I'll look to play with this pair. So it just depends on the structures, it depends on the area price decides to respect. So in either directions, I think I'll have a good position to play with on gold. So that's my analysis right there on gold. So I think this one has really spent lots of time on this pair. So let's see. So look at the positions I had. So this was the buy, this was the buy, the scaling, inability, and price is currently selling. So let's take this out right here, take this off the hourly. So cool. So this is what I'm looking at currently on the hourly time frame. So it's an impulse and price pulls back to an area like this. So let's see how price interacts from this area. There's been a push, inability right here. So currently we could see price playing to the downside within a structure like this, coming to the downside. So if price comes back to an area like this, personally I want to see if price is pulling back to this piece right here, so I can take buys again to the upside. So that's my analysis right there on gold. And so currently I'll be patient, and if price does something completely different, I showed you already, if price does something completely different, if we break to the upside, then I'm looking at this piece and this structure right here, and it's going to be push and stuff like this. So that's my analysis right there on gold, guys. So let's look at the next pairs and see if there's any opportunities as well. Alright guys, so let's look at the indices, and I'm not going to waste so much time on this because there's really no positions I'm really looking at on these pairs. But let's look at the bigger picture thing. So if we zoom out, this is US30 on the weekly time frame. So the bigger picture, it's an impulse correction. So that's how price has been moving. Currently we're trading above 40,000, this psychological level. So the next point price can trade to, based off of psychological levels, is 50,000. So it's been an impulse and there's been a correction to this area. So I'm expecting prices to move to 50,000. So while looking at this, and if you had to move to lower time frames, and before we move to lower time frames, I'll show you guys another piece. So you have this structure right here, and this minor structure right here. So yes, you have a trend line, and sometimes you need to switch between the trend lines and the channels just so you can see price from different angles as well. So if you're going off of the trend line, which is this piece right here coming from the weekly time frame, we still have price trading above this trend line. So I'll take this out, but at the same time I have this channel structure I'm looking at. So there's always a switch between the trend lines and the channels. It's something you can pay attention to as well. So price is currently trading above 40,000, and I was looking at this piece right here, this structure right here. So price seems to be consolidating, and every time price seems to be consolidating, you can look at it as pullbacks on lower time frames, because on some time frames it's just going to give you a push and a consolidation right there. So looking at this on the weekly time frame, if this price had to move to the downside, because we've had this inability for price to go through this area, so week 1, week 2, week 3, and we haven't broken above this area. So this is something I'm paying attention to. And I was looking at this in the morning, and here was my thought process once I looked at this price in the morning. So I was like, if price breaks out of this area to the upside, so if we see an impulsive move to the upside, then we could see price testing this and movement again to the upside. But currently we've had this inability for prices to go through this area for 3 weeks already. So that tells me we might see prices pulling back to the downside. So there's a couple of things I'm looking at, or there's a couple of areas I'm looking at. First, we have this trend line. We haven't really broken out of this trend line. So we had this piece right here. We had a breakout of this trend line and price pulled back to the upside. So that's one thing. So we could see prices pulling back. Let's say we could see prices coming back to this trend line right here. That's one possibility. So let's clean this. So we could see prices coming back to this trend line. And when you look at the channel I've been paying attention to, so this channel structure right here, it's a push. Like you have this range you're playing in. So if you see prices coming to the downside, taking out this trend line, there's a couple of areas I'm looking at. First, there's a psychological level right here, 40,000. And when you look at the second part, is this trend line right here. So if price starts coming to the downside, I'm looking at this first push to this trend line. If we break the next area, psychological level, if we go through the psychological level, then I'm expecting prices to come back to this area. So there's 3 points that's where I'm really paying attention to. And let's see how price is going to interact and move to the downside. Sorry about this. So let's see if price can get to those areas. So that's on the weekly time frame. Let's look at the daily. So once I looked at the daily time frame, I could see already. So you had this push, impulse correction, then we had a violation of this. So on lower time frames, I'm looking at this and I'm looking at reasons as to why price might decide to move to the downside. Because if we had this interaction from here and we had buyers stepping in aggressively, I was just expecting prices to keep respecting this trend line and giving you this pullbacks and price moving to the upside. So looking at this right now, we had a violation of this trend line, which for me was already something to pay attention to. And if you look at this on the 8-hour time frame, so I had to even bring in the channel just to be sure we're really going to the downside. But so if you look at this on the daily time frame, the trend line was taken out already. On the lower time frame, on the 8-hour time frame, this channel has been taken out. So there's a lot when I'm looking at this, and it tells me there's just an inability for prices to move to the upside. We haven't taken out these highs, which is a problem for me as well. We haven't taken out these highs. That's a problem as well. So I was expecting prices to pull back to this trend line from the channel, and we see prices moving to the upside. So there's been an inability for prices to move to the upside. So first thing, if price has to move then to the downside, there should be some points I'm really paying attention to. And the first one, you have these lows right here. We could see price taking out these lows. And if price moves again further to the downside, we could see price testing this psychological level. So here's the first push to an area like this. This lows right here. Sorry. So we have this lows right here. And if price goes further, we could see price get into this psychological level. So that's something I'll pay attention to. And at the same time, I think I was looking at the DXY. So if the DXY has to make this run to the downside to take out this area, and because the indices on the DXY, they stay positively correlated, so if the DXY has to make this run to the downside, that's something I'll pay attention to on US30. So we could see price taking out this lows right here, taking out this lows, and we could see price testing this psychological level. Now the psychological level is a little bit further down, so the first point of interest for me has to be this lows right here. If we can take out this lows, it's going to make lots of sense, and it's going to print a different structure on US30. So that's on the 8-hour time frame. The 4-hour time frame, I think, is the same thing. It's not much of a difference. So when I look at this on the 4-hour time frame, we're really trading outside this space right here. So we had a break, price came back in, we had another break, and this for me just looks like price is having a test of this area, and we could see a movement to the downside taking out this lows. So that's something I'm paying attention to, because once we take out this lows, if price then comes to the downside, we could see prices moving again to the upside. So right now I think on US30 there's nothing I can do, because I don't trade this breaks on test, so I'm just going to sit on my hands and see what price does on this pair. But gold, I think, is something I'll pay attention to coming into next week. So that's it right there for US30. There's nothing I can really do on this pair, so let's look at the next one. Alright guys, so now let's look at NAS100. So same thing like what's happening on US30, it's just this inability as we move into the upside. You look at the bigger picture again, it's say price moving to the upside, and going off of psychological levels, we're trading above 20,000. So I'm still expecting NAS100 to get all to like 25,000. So I'm expecting prices to move to 25,000. But currently, I think we just have this roadblock, I think, at an area like this. And you look at this space again, price seems to be consolidating. So week 1, week 2, week 3, and we haven't really done something crazy with like comparing this piece right here to what happened previously. Price was moving to the upside easily. So currently we're having this consolidation around this area, and once we have a consolidation, if you can spot this sometimes from higher time frames, it means you need to look at lower time frames and see what's happening. So staying on the weekly time frame, if price has to move to the downside, first point of interest for me is a psychological level of 20,000. If we see price coming back to 20,000, then we might see an impulsive move again to the upside. So that's something I'm paying attention to. Now there's a possibility, just looking at this from the weekly time frame, going off of the structure thing again, you could see price even pulling back to areas like this. Now this is going to be like a deeper pullback thing for price to come back to this trend line on the weekly time frame, and you need something crazy to happen with the US economy again for stuff like this to happen. And you know, we had the tariff thing that caused this drop, so if we have another crazy thing coming from the US economy, and we can see price pulling back to areas like this. So this piece right here is not my concern right now. So for prices to come back to this area, it could happen, but currently I'm not really paying attention to that. So if there's an area I'm really paying attention to, there's a psychological level of 20,000. So we could see price coming back to this area, and for price to move again to the upside. So that's on a weekly time frame. So let's look at this consolidation thing on lower time frames and see if it's giving us any clues. So here's on the daily time frame, and so here's the reason why I had to pause a little bit on this indices, because you look at this as well on the daily time frame, the price was moving with like, so you had this movement thing, impulse correction, waiting for price to consolidate around an area like this, an inability to move down so we could take prices to the upside, and we had price trading outside. So this is a little bit tricky right now, just looking for the buys. Personally, if you look at this piece, so you look at this highs right here, we took out the highs, but we had an impulsive reaction from the sellers, taking prices to the downside. So looking at this, I think there might be some selling opportunities coming again. And if price decides to sell, first point of interest for me is this area right here. If we can take out this lows, and the next area, the psychological level of 20,000. So if price starts coming down, then I'm expecting this area to get taken out, and I'm expecting this area to get tested as well. Now let's do the flip on this pair. So let's see on the 8-hour time frame. So let's look at the same thing with what's happening on US30. You're going off of this piece right here. Price is currently trading below this area, and it's just like there's just a lot that's happening on this indices. You look at it from the daily time frame, you have a violation of this trend line. I'll just take this out. On the daily time frame, you have a violation of this trend line. On the 8-hour time frame, you have a violation of a channel. So it's just not looking, so looking for buys right now is a little bit difficult for me, because we've taken out the space on the daily time frame, we've taken out the trend line. So in a situation like this, I'll personally always wait for prices to take out these lows and for prices to, let's say, test areas like this. So once I see price validating certain structures on multiple time frames, on the daily time frame, that trend line is taken out. On the 8-hour time frame, this channel is taken out. Personally, I just want to pause a little bit on this pair, and my game plan moving forward is, if price can take out these lows and maybe trade into this area, then we can look for buys again to the upside, because then I'll look at this as an impulse. Like everything is an impulse, and everything coming to the downside is a correction like this, for us to take the buys again to the upside. And it's a similar structure of what's happening on US30. So I can consider everything as a build up, then a pullback, and for price to move to the upside. So on this time frame, I'm just going to, on this pair, I'm going to sit on my hands as well and see what price is trying to do. Now, if price goes above these highs right here, that's a different thing. If price goes above these highs, then we're looking at the different structure thing. So if we see price trading above these highs, then I'll look for something completely different. Let's see, here's on the 8-hour time frame. I'll look for something completely different. I'll look at this piece and a structure like this. So that's something to pay attention to. If price goes above this area right here, then I'll look at this. It's an impulse, it's a correction. It's an impulse, then it's a correction. And I think on US30 as well, if price keeps moving to the upside, I'll look at it differently. I'll look at this piece right here, impulse, correction. So this is going to make it look a little bit dirty, but I hope you get the point. So I'm going to look at this. It's an impulse, everything is a correction, and we're expecting prices to move to the upside. So I'll take this out for now right here. So on NAS100, that's what I'm looking at currently. So there's still possibility price can move to the upside, yeah, if you look at it this way. But I need to see price taking out these highs first. I need to see price taking out these highs, and if price takes out these highs, then I'll respect this structure right here, expecting prices to then move to the upside. So that's something I'll be looking at. So currently we're not doing that right now, so I'll just take this piece out and look at this. So at the same time, I'll look at the DXY. If we break out of this area, testing, moving to the upside, that could be an early indication for us to pay attention to a new structure move on this pair. So we could look at this space and look at this space to the upside. So everything, it's a build up, it's a correction, then a build up, and then a correction. So as you're moving from one time frame to the next, you need to switch your trend lines, you need to switch your channels, because as price expands, it gives you different structures. So that's what I'm looking at on NAS100, and I'm just going to sit on my hands as well. 4-hour time frame, same thing. I'm going to sit on my hands. So personally, like coming into next week, I want to see this lows taken out. I want to see price coming in lower, something like this, just getting this push to the downside. Then we can take this bigger move to the upside. So that's my analysis right there on NAS100. So let's look at the last pair. All right, guys. So the S&P500, this has been a good pair to look at. The only thing is we've not had really good entries or good confirmations. So bigger picture thing is price moving to the upside. and you can use your channel, you can use your trend lines, you can use your psychological levels, so you can see the bigger picture. It's like that movement thing to the upside, impulse correction, impulse correction. So let's pay attention to this piece right here. So, and here's a good reaction thing. So price came to the upside, push to the upside. If you take this out, you look right here, there's a psychological level of 6,000. Now for a couple of weeks, so there's on the weekly time frame, for a couple of weeks we had this inability right here for prices to move to the upside. Once this inability got resolved, we had price moving to the downside, reacting from this area. There's a psych level right here, 5,000. There was a trend line right here from lower time, from higher time frames as well. So you had this interaction taking prices to the upside. Currently we're still sat right here, another inability again at 6,000. So this is getting really interesting, because you look at this space, 3 weeks again, like all indices for the last 3 weeks, we've been consolidating. So you had a push, and price is currently struggling around those areas. So just looking at this from this time frame, from the weekly time frame, inability for prices to go through my psych level of 6,000, previous inability for price to go through this area. So the question for me is, why is price facing difficulties to go through 6,000? And if we still see this inability for prices to go through 6,000, then I'm expecting basic principles of psych levels, inability to go through one level, I'm expecting prices to trade in the opposite direction. So the only thing is, the only difference will be if price, let's say, goes to the upside, then I'll look at something completely different. I'll wait for a pullback to this area, same thing, psych level, and expect prices to move to the upside. But currently looking at it, there's an inability right here for prices to go through 6,000. Previously we had an inability for price to go through 6,000, and we saw this massive move to the downside. So we could see some correction again to the downside, or we could see price ranging again within the structure. So there's a lot that can happen. So let's look at this on the daily time frame really quick. So as price moved to the upside, higher highs, higher lows, then we had a violation, we had a test of this area, still this inability for prices to go to the upside. So if you look at the sales I was anticipating on US30, NAS100, let's see. If you look at NAS100 and I'm anticipating this sales, so prices can take out this lows, pulling back maybe to an area like this. You look at US30, I'm anticipating sales, taking out this area, pulling back to areas like this. And one pair I was really paying attention to was the S&P500, because you look at this from the weekly time frame, this is telling you there's that inability to go through 6,000. There's just been an inability to go, so we haven't really broken out of this psychological level of 6,000, so we're still trading below this area. So I was looking at one pair for the indices that can give me an idea as to what's really happening on those other pairs, and the S&P 500 seemed to be the cleanest one. So we came towards 6,000. Now we came really close to 6,000. There was an inability, moved down to the daily time frame, and I realized there's a violation of this trend line. So all right, cool. So it means the buyers are having a pause. So what this tells me is an inability again for price to go through this area. I'm expecting a move to the downside. Now the point of interest for me, or the areas I'll pay attention to, I want to see this lows taken out, this piece right here. If we see prices trading to the downside, then I know we're taking out this low, so we could see a further move to the downside. But unlike the other pairs like US30 and NAS100, if we take out these lows, I know I'm expecting prices here. On US30, if we take out these lows, I might be expecting prices here. As with the S&P is completely different, because the psych level is like really lower. So that's something I'll personally just pay attention to, this piece right here. Let's see if we can get a drop to the downside, then we'll start anticipating something else. So again, I'll look at this on the weekly, daily. Let's look at the 8-hour time frame and see what price is doing. So on this time frame as well, as you start moving to lower time frames, you had this bigger build up, you had a violation, you had this piece right here, you've had a violation. So I just think we might see prices moving to the downside, testing these areas right here. So that's the piece I'm looking at coming into next week. Let's see if we can have a push to the downside. Now, it doesn't mean the bias to the upside, like we're completely done with the bias to the upside, because the bigger picture again is just for prices to move to the upside. But once you move to lower time frames, you might see price giving you an impulse and a pullback like this. You might see price giving you an impulse and a pullback. So this is something we might be looking at, or this is something that might be forming coming into subsequent weeks. So I'll have to sit on my hands on the S&P 500 as well. Maybe once we get the next wave, then it's going to complete the pattern on everything. So right now we have a build up thing. So we have a build up. This is what I'm looking at. There's a build up, there's a violation, there's an inability for price to go to the upside. So if we having a deeper pullback, then I'm expecting price to pull back like this, giving us this push, this one, something like this, and for price to move to the upside. That's one way I'll look at the pullback. And you can also look at it as a consolidation thing. So you see price moving, giving you structures like this, and the further move again to the upside. So I think that's it. It's just the same thing with those indices, the same thing with the other indices, NAS, US30. But personally, coming into next week, the pair I'm really paying attention to is gold. So if we break out of this space to the upside, then I'm looking at this structure and we have a new thing to play with, impulse correction. We'll look for buys to the upside. That's one way I'll look at this pair. And if we're moving to the downside impulsively, let's see how price reacts from an area like this. An inability for price to go to the upside, we get a break. I'm expecting prices again to move now to the downside. So you could see something like this. All right, guys, so it's a lot that we might see coming into next week, but I'll pay attention to gold. That's the pair I think has the best structure. Like right now, gold has the best structure compared to the other pairs. So I'll look for selling opportunities if we can drop prices to the downside. If I don't get entries, I'll sit on my hands. But if price pulls back to the downside, I'm looking for buys off of this area. Yep. If we do not see this buys, if price moves to the upside, I'll wait for a pullback and I'll look for buys again. So currently there's no trade I'm in currently. So I'll just sit on my hands and let's look at what we can take next week. All right, guys, stay patient, trade consistently, and hey, above all, make sure you pray and get an enlightenment so you can see prices differently, just so you can switch from one spot to the next.